This Choircast podcast is brought to you by Better Living Through Literature, How Books Change Lives and Sometimes History. Going all the way back to Plato, genius thinkers have explored the impact of poetry, fiction, and drama. Better Living surveys the great debates, from the early philosophers to Jane Austen and Percy Shelley, to contemporary battles over multiculturalism and book bans. In the process, it shares compelling accounts of lives transformed by literature. Better Living is available now on Amazon.
Well, hello, boys and girls, mums and dads. Welcome to I Was a Teenage Fundamentalist. Brian, it's Saturday morning in Australia, and I'm tired. You're tired. Let's do a podcast.
But, not tired enough to speak to the wonderful guest that we have on today, Troy, but we'll get to that in a second. It's coming towards the end of the year, which for me, I've had one of those years where we quite often at work get to September and then we go, it's that run to the end of the year. Everything is hectic. But I've had a year where there's been zero downtime. It has been crazy. I had 2 weeks off in September, but it's the only break I've had all year. And I'm having a week or so in December, but I feel exhausted. I feel incredibly run down, more so than usual. I know you've had a fair bit of movement in your life too. How are you going?
Oh yeah, this has been a shit year. And for our American listeners, just to let you know, we're coming into our summer. So the end of the year is where we basically not only shut down from a business perspective, but also we tend to go on holidays and things like that. So it's a sort of a double whammy for us. But yeah, man, I've had just a shit year. And I'm really looking forward to 2025 because, America has a new president and I think it's just going to be great.
I think it's too soon. But we are going to talk to our guest about that in a second. But firstly, I'm going to introduce our guest. We've had a little bit of help from our friends in AI to give us a bit of who is our guest? And our guest is April Ajoy. And this is what AI is saying about April. That April is a comedian, a podcaster, an all-round troublemaker for the Christian right, which I'm loving. Yes, this is great, April. April grew up in the heart of American Evangelicalism as an evangelist kid, and she's seen stuff. From the weird church rules to the dangers of Christian nationalism. April's seen it all. She's not afraid to laugh at the absurdity of it all, which is what we love about her, and many other things. And she's got a knack for that, tackling the serious stuff, but also the deep hypocrisies that we see, which there's many of them, which I'm sure we're going to chat about today. Alongside a very important thing, that April's brought out a book, The Star-Spangled Jesus, and Leaving Christian Nationalism and Finding a True Faith. We really want to talk a lot more about that. But we want to dig into a couple of things, and one of them, it's got our backs up a little bit, April. We're not going to lie, because your official bio says that you've been featured on BuzzFeed, CNN, Newsweek, and lots more. However, your publisher may seem to have forgotten that you were on this episode of this little podcast called I Was a Teenage Fundamentalist. And, it's not in your bio, and, okay, it's up to your publisher, but...
Yeah, moving on.
Yeah, whatever. So here we go. April is back, and we are going to have a wonderful chat today. I know that our listeners loved last time you were on, April. But firstly, before we kick off, welcome back to I Was a Teenage Fundamentalist.
Wow. I am so excited to be here. And it took a while to plan this because y'all are in Australia.
I do love this. I love the fact we were having a chat, everyone, just before April came on about how people like to say the Australian accent back to us. And sometimes, most of the time, it comes out as British. And
it comes out as Dick Van Dyke in Mary Poppins. A bad British accent. That's normally what happens. Yeah, it's also you know who also does that is the Mayfields. D.L. Mayfield. When we talk to her, she goes, didn't you kill my brother?
A little bit Cockney. That's right.
Yeah, a little bit Cockney.
Sorry, April.
No, you're fine. I actually watched one of the Married at First Sight seasons from Australia, because apparently, I don't know what y'all's ethics rules are over there, but it was dramatic, and someone recommended. So I watched the entire 30 some episodes of season 10 of Married at First Sight Australia, and I was hooked. But I was hearing a lot of Australian accents, and so there was a stretch there where I felt like I could do an Australian accent. And I saw a TikTok, which I know this has nothing to do with why we're here, but I saw a TikTok that said if Americans say R in R, like the letters R and R really fast, it sounds like you're saying "oh no" in an Australian accent.
Well, go on,
like
show us.
R and R, R and R.
Yeah, I know. That's right. That's right. I know.
That is actually quite good because we're quite nasally as a nation as well. So you got the nasal. We are as a nation. We pride ourselves on being nasally. Hey, we could talk about Married at First Sight. In Australia, we call it MAFS because we like
MAFS, right?
MAFS, yeah, an acronym for everything. I am an avid MAFS watcher. I love it. I love it. Love the drama. And some of it is because it makes me feel normal. And my partner and I will watch it and we'll go, see, we're not that bad.
Yeah. What did she say? No ethics.
I swear, though, that the experts, they put opposites together intentionally to cause drama. Like, there's no way that's actually like a scientific, y'all should be together. I am convinced they do it. They put the people together that intentionally would just hate each other.
Yeah, they put them together for ratings. That's what they do.
I know, exactly.
Hey, as Paula Abdul said in the 80s, opposites attract. So it could have worked, but sometimes it does. Very rarely, but sometimes it works.
You know what? I think one of the ones that we want to share with you, April, that you can go and look up later is a ranger. And that's what you are. In Australia, you're a ranger. And so my daughter has a friend named Ryan, and he's called Ranger Ryan, and everyone knows him as Ranger Ryan. So I'm going to leave it to you to look it up, Ranga, and I'll get others that are listening to
Ranga. It's not like you're saying ranger. Ranga.
No, Ranger.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Ranger April.
I'll write it down.
And it may, come across as offensive when you read what it is.
Great.
but I promise you it's not. It's actually a term of endearment here. And I have two daughters that are rangers. Yeah. And they, wear the badge very proudly. They've become less rangers as they get older. So we're just going to leave you with that. But
good to know.
Rangers.
I'll look that up later.
Perfect.
Okay, well, let's get into this and let's start asking the questions that we've written down. Now, April, you know the way that we are. We will go off script and we want you to go off script as well. Just, flow with it for sure. But let's talk about the book because I know that that's something that's, near and dear to you. And congratulations on the book. Very you. CNN to have the book on the bookshelf behind your shoulder.
I know.
For those that, this is a podcast, but oh well. But hey, what is the most cringeworthy thing that you documented in the book? Okay, in the name of Christian nationalism, excuse me. The thing that you look back now and just go, oh my God.
I mean, a lot. I'd say probably the most public cringe moment was when I sang my original song called America Say Jesus on the Jim Bakker show when I was 18. That's probably up there.
Yeah, it's funny because that actually is our second question because I thought you might have gone there. When you were singing that song or going on that show, and this sort of reflects on sort of Trumpism. Let's not go too deep down the Trump thing yet, but when you did that, were you in the studio sort of going, oh, Jim Bakker, didn't he do all these weird things and steal all this money and go to jail? And did you think about that? Or was it like, oh, no, he's just a product of the forgiveness of Christ?
Yeah. So I was 18, so I didn't know a lot of the details of his scandal. I knew that there was a scandal, and I was told I didn't know about the more sexual allegations. I knew about the financial stuff and that he had made this Christian timeshare and oversold, and it was more financial crimes, and that he wrote a book in prison that repenting and saying that he was wrong. And so, when you're in that world, your testimony, the worse you were, the better your testimony, I guess. And so I mean, I kind of thought that it was a good opportunity for me and my song, my dad and his book and all that stuff. And I mean, even then, I thought some of the things that he was selling was a little odd. Like he was selling a sword on the show that I was on for Father's Day, and he like gave my dad a sword, like a real sword, like a giant, real sharp sword. And he literally gave it to my dad like right before he like kicked it to me to sing my song. And I remember thinking, that's weird. I don't know why we're selling a sword. It was called Solomon's sword. So he was a bit eclectic, but they were really nice. And I honestly it was just, I was around those types of people growing up.
Was he still with Tammy Faye at that point?
No, so he was with his second wife, who he's still with now, Lori. So that's who I met. I didn't meet Tammy Faye.
Okay, because Tammy Faye's the real hero. She's like a gay icon now. And I mean, she's passed away, but she's like, a big deal. I don't know if you saw the movie.
I did. I wish I would have met her. She seemed lovely.
And I think the son, Jay, has carried on the legacy a bit. Not the Jim legacy, but the Tammy Faye legacy.
Yes.
Like, he's very progressive and out there. And he's a minister somewhere, isn't he? In maybe Minnesota or
I thought it was New York. At one stage, I think he was in New York City.
Let's go New York. I was just trying to make him a little bit more rural, but that's okay.
In the heartland. Yeah, fair enough.
Oh, good effort.
But I think we've established this, though. Troy went to school in Georgia, so he has an unfair disadvantage. He was totally soaked in the language, and he came back with an accent when he came back.
Yeah, that's why I'm wearing a Braves shirt.
Oh, Atlanta Braves. You a Braves fan?
I am a Braves fan, yeah, and a
Wow.
Dallas Cowboys fan as well. Okay, so let's get on to this. So, hey, in terms of your leaving, right? Because we want to get into the book and the stories that you tell within the book for sure. But what was the turning point for you? And what made you basically go, I'm done with Christian nationalism?
Yes. There was not one major thing. It was kind of there were several big things, a million small things over probably 10 years. I think one of the hardest parts about stopping Christian nationalism is that it hides in plain sight with just everyday American evangelicalism. And so my faith was very wrapped up in my political beliefs. So when I started questioning one, it opened up questions for the other. So the first really big thing that happened was, since I was raised Pentecostal, we believed, name it and claim it. As long as you have enough faith that God will give you what you ask for. We believed in faith healing. And so my dad got diagnosed with cancer in 2011, and stage 4 non-smokers lung cancer. And I just had no doubts that God was going to heal him. And he passed away 4 months later. And so I immediately knew that wasn't true, because it clearly did not work for me. And so I immediately started questioning my theology around miracles and healing and faith and all of that. And so that opened the door to my political ideology, because they were so intertwined. You could not tell where one started and the other ended. And so the next big thing was really Sandy Hook. The shooting at the elementary school at Sandy Hook in 2012. It was the first time that I listened to another side on guns, and because I was just heartbroken at what had happened. And for the first time, the usual conservative Christian tropes just weren't working for me, of well, no, it's a slippery slope. If you ban that type of gun, then they're going to ban all guns, and then they're going to come and persecute Christians, and we're going to lose our freedom to worship. Everything was a slippery slope. And I just remember thinking but these kids died. They were murdered. That's not holding water with me anymore. And so that was the first time I actually listened to the Democratic or the more progressive position. Then I realized, they're not trying to ban all guns like I had been told in the fear-mongering propaganda that I heard all the time. They were just I was you know what, maybe it makes sense to have some restrictions on who can get a deadly, automatic or semi-automatic weapon that can kill lots of people in a very quick amount of time. Maybe we shouldn't have just anybody can get that. So it was like little things like that. But I learned to kind of keep those things quiet for a while, because when I said them out loud, I was very much like, that's a slippery slope, April. Like, that's going to open the door to Christian persecution. That's coming, the biblical end times, and all these things. And so, I mean, there were a bunch of other things that had happened too. Like one of my brothers came out as gay in 2015, which he grew up in the same homophobic household I had grown up in. And so I was like, well, now I know it's not a choice. Like, there's no way he would choose to just be gay in the same world that I'm from. And so, but I would say like the biggest catalyst was Trump, in just realizing like Trump just made the hypocrisy in that world so obvious, because I remember in the 90s being told that we could not vote or support Bill Clinton because he had an affair on his wife. And if he would lie to his wife, what would he do to the American people? Like, he could not be trusted. And it was really instilled at me. And I was like, gosh, 7 or 6 when this happened. It was instilled in me, like, character matters. Character is really important. And we need to only vote for people who have strong, good, moral character. And then that just went out the window with Donald Trump. And like a lot of them were the same people that were saying this. So I was a kid when Bill Clinton was president. And so I was like, oh, okay. So we're just hypocrites then. And we're just being very openly hypocrites. And so then it took several years of just kind of, realizing that I was a Christian nationalist the whole time. And then figuring out like, okay, well, what do I do from here? Like, I need to start sounding the alarms. Like, this is not really following the teachings of Jesus like I thought we were doing. So yeah.
So we definitely are going to get to Trump later.
We keep saying that because we want to get there. We just don't want to do it too early, or we'll just stay there, right?
Yeah, we will stay there because it's a bit of a passion project for me too. Even though we're the opposite side of the world, I think it will definitely have effects here. You've managed to stay a Christian though. So you've cast away the Christian fundamentalist and Christian nationalist, I guess, not just the label, but the teachings and beliefs and things like that. How have you done that? How have you actually held on to and maintained a faith? What is it that remains that holds you together, and what is the semblance of faith that's left?
Yeah. So I believe in God, and I have had what I would call as spiritual experiences in my life that I couldn't really explain in a natural way. Like, I don't know how to explain that. There very well could be a natural explanation for it, but I don't know what it is.
I've done acid too. It's fun.
It's a slippery slope, Brian.
It's a slippery slope. Right. I know.
That'll lead to marijuana.
So just the language that I've always used for God is Jesus. And I love the teachings of Jesus. And what really was like reading the Gospels and having this desire to be like Christ and to be Christ-like and to love my neighbor as myself and to have this like radical, inclusive faith that woke me up outside of Christian nationalism. Like, it was what I would call following the Holy Spirit or just following the teachings of Jesus. And so I feel like I don't know. I have this, I just can't shake Jesus. I don't know what to tell you. Like my friend, Eve Was Framed. She talks all the time about like she's an atheist and we're friends. And she says all the time, like, you can't really choose your beliefs. You either believe something or you don't. And you can't make yourself believe something and you can't make yourself not believe something. But I hold my faith very loosely now. And I'm very aware that I could be wrong and that none of my beliefs could be true. Some of them might, some of them aren't. And I'm very aware that the chances of me being right on everything that I think is true is probably very slim. But I don't know. It's just kind of been this really encouraging, it's just been like this constant in my life that even when I felt like I was being gaslit in the church and that pastors and even a lot of Christian leaders around me were telling me like, no, you have to vote for Trump, or, not that I don't want to go to Trump yet, but, saying all these things that, we need to kick out the immigrants because they don't belong here. We need to build the wall. We need to demonize all gay people because of the Bible. And like all of these things that I was seeing were actually really harming people. And when I would push back on that, they would make me feel like I was the crazy one. But every time I went to pray or anytime I went to read the red letters, the Gospels, I was like, no, I'm not wrong. Like that's what y'all are saying is the opposite of what we should be doing. So I don't know if that answers your question. I also just say like now I don't feel like I don't have this need to like defend my faith now. Like I also don't have this need that I need to convert other people either, because I kind of believe in a more universal Christ anyway. And I don't believe in hell. Like, I mean, if you were to ask a conservative Christian if I'm a Christian, they would tell you, hell no, there's no way. But hey, I'm not going to let the bigots steal my faith, because honestly, it really pisses me off how they're weaponizing Jesus, who is a brown immigrant refugee. And if you read like his teachings, he would probably lean more socialist if you had to give him a category. So
no, fair enough. And look, we're asking these questions because a lot of our audience are at different stages and, still consider themselves and may well continue to consider themselves to be progressive Christians and have some sort of faith, even though Brian and I don't. So we're not asking this to be hostile. We're more asking it, asking for a friend. So what then do you think about those that have given up on Christianity? You sort of hinted at, you've got relationships with people that have, and, you're obviously cool with it, but they saw the same things that you saw in your book, and yet they've stayed. Is that they've left and you've stayed. Is that a mistake on their part? Do you think they've not given it enough time or not read enough? I don't know. I'm asking you.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm not going to say where anyone lands is a mistake, because I think we all make our decisions based on what is best for us. And so I have no qualms with anybody who completely leaves the faith, who becomes agnostic or atheist, or maybe even joins a different religion. Like I think we all are connected in this shared human experience. And I mean, I would say by the divine, but I know some people don't believe that, and that's fine. I'm much more about shared values versus shared beliefs. And so as long as, in my opinion, as long as you're making your world a better place, like loving people and, not harming people and just trying to love your neighbor, which, that's a universal idea, the idea of loving each other. That's not just a Christian idea. As long as you're doing that, like, I don't care what you believe.
Fair call too. So thank you. Thank you for affirming our atheism, actually my atheism. I think Troy has fallen more into an agnostic space potentially now, but he doesn't know. That's how agnostic he is.
Yeah. I've been a militant Christian. I've been a militant atheist, and now I'm sort of not too militant about anything, So I get it. And yeah,
being militant's exhausting.
It is. It's tiring. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
But we know what happens to the lukewarm. Just saying.
Right, spewing out of your mouth. Hey, so I've been watching what you've been doing on your Instagram feed, and I've noticed recently that there's a lot of posts where you're alongside Christians like Tim Whitaker of the New Evangelicals podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about what you're doing together with him and what you're trying to achieve. I'm sure you're on a book junket 100%, but why are you aligning with him? What is it that resonates?
Tim and I resonate. We have a lot in common in that we're both progressive Christians still. There's a lot of people that are talking about the harm in the church and the harm of Christian nationalism. A lot of them have left the faith. And if people are still in the church who may just now be starting to question things, they're not going to listen to an atheist. They will listen to someone who is still Christian. And so it sounds really like I hate this phrase so much, but I kind of feel like I'm a missionary to Christian nationalists. I say that jokingly, but truly, like, I feel like I was one of them, like, and it's super harmful. And I think like because I was in it so deep and I meant well and I thought I was doing good, to a degree I can empathize with their position, because I know the way that they're thinking and I know where they are. And Tim is the same way. So we kind of have this like like our goal is to be kind of the middle ground for someone that's just coming out or maybe just starting to deconstruct or just starting to question, like, why are we all in on Trump? To just kind of be that space where people can ask questions and not feel pushed in any one direction on where they land. Like, obviously we're going to push you towards being queer affirming and push you towards like not being a judgmental asshole. But since we still identify Christian though, we get a lot, people will actually listen to us that are still in that world.
And you're obviously going to push them towards swearing as well, because you've got a bit of potty mouth. You've said piss and asshole. You've said a whole lot of really bad words. I get it though, because I remember when I was first deconstructing, and this is back in the day, it was even before Facebook, that's how old I am. And I would go onto these like bulletin boards, they were websites, but I'd go onto these bulletin boards and people would be there talking atheism and talking, Wicca and all these, and I was just like, no way was I going to listen to them. I was just like, it was just too big a leap for me to take. And even as I was deconstructing and didn't even know that's what I was doing, I was reading Philip Yancey, who was, you could still buy his books in the Christian bookshop, and yet there was sort of a liberal vibe to him. So I totally get it. And I think it's important work that you do, but it's also you being true to who you are, right? This is what you think and this is what you believe. And so kudos to you.
Thank you.
With the Christian nationalism stuff, from where we sit in Australia, and it's been really interesting to watch the election, which we will eventually get to, and our listeners just be a bit more patient.
I thought you were going there now, by the way. I was going to go, okay, here we go. Okay. And do it.
Look,
pull it in.
Well, we may end up getting there. But it seems like from afar that Christian nationalism is actually growing. It's something that's becoming more and more and more influential. So in some ways, do you feel like you're losing that fight? Are you disheartened by what is happening in terms of it's really like a big rebranding. If you're a bikie gang, you'd be doing a patch over. It's like Christianity is being patched over by nationalists, and there's not much of a voice outside of that we're hearing anyway. Are you hearing different voices in the States? Are you actually hearing the progressives, or are they just completely drowned out by this Christian nationalism?
I definitely am hearing progressive voices, but I also seek those voices out. We are at a disadvantage in that the majority, or the majority of American evangelical churches have bought into Christian nationalism. I don't think most of them realize it, because this has been something that has been in the works for decades. I mean, really since the beginning of the country, but especially since like Ronald Reagan and Jerry Falwell and the moral majority and all of that. So we're at a disadvantage in that we don't have like a church where thousands of people are coming to us every Sunday and we get to say, hey, we don't tell you who to vote for in this election. We don't endorse candidates, but we will tell you to vote for, quote, biblical values. And then they list every single Republican talking point. So we're at a disadvantage in that the majority of Christian spaces are very much consumed by conservatives. And there's this narrative within Christianity, which is, at least in America, and in white evangelicalism especially, that you can only vote Republican if you're a true Christian. If you vote Democrat, I mean, there's churches that will even say like voting for Democrat is a sin and that you need to be put under church discipline. Like, this is a deeply rooted belief in these spaces that voting for a Democrat will send you to hell, and voting for a Republican is the godly, Christ-like choice. So they have conflated one's salvation or their beliefs with a political party and political power. So we have that going against us. I will say, I do think 81% of white evangelicals voted for Trump again in 2024. It's about the same as it was in 2020. But I personally know, and I'm one of them, several people who voted for Trump. I never voted for Trump. Just got to clarify that. I was a notorious never Trumper. That's like going to be something I tell my grandkids one day, and I can't wait for that day. Like, I did not vote for that man. But I know of several people in my family and beyond who voted for Trump either in 2016 or 2020 who did not vote for him. this time around because of their faith in Christianity and finally like seeing the Christian nationalism at play. And I think what we're seeing, at least from my perspective, I think he actually lost a lot of evangelical support because this was the first time that there were two different groups, evangelicals for Harris and you had Christians for Harris. I don't think I ever saw a movement like that. And it wasn't huge. Like, I mean, it's small compared to Christians for Trump. But like we're seeing small progress here. And I think what we're seeing now, a lot of people that are identifying as white evangelical are doing it because evangelical has become more of a political term here in America. It's more of an identity marker than it is a religion. And so you have a lot of people that are identifying as white evangelical because they're white and they are culturally Christian, but they don't really go to church and they don't really read their Bibles and they're just kind of part of this movement. So yes, progressives are way behind, but we do exist. And I think we are making some small efforts to bring people out of that world, to actually follow the teachings of Jesus. It's just, it's really small and it's trickling. But I really think in the next 4 years with Trump's policies that I think we're going to be seeing, I mean, gosh, I don't even know. But I think with like ripping apart families who are immigrants, whatever like people are going to be suffering with all these tariffs and all. And I mean, and just with his cabinet picks, okay, I'm not going to get into Trump. Regardless, I think in the next 4 years, people are going to be waking up that are inside the church where they hear their pastors and their leaders continue to praise Trump, but then they're seeing babies ripped out of mothers' hands because they're an undocumented immigrant. Like, I think people are going to start feeling like that's hearing a still small voice, feeling that tug in their stomach that says like, something's wrong. This is wrong. This is not okay. And there's going to be a big exodus of more people deconstructing, just like we saw in 2020. That's my prediction.
So let's not pretend that we haven't gone down the Trump rabbit hole, so we don't need to apologize for it anymore. So here's my question. Are you ready? Uh-huh. Did you expect Trump to win this time around, or were you shocked? Because I know Brian expected Trump to win, and I thought, no, I think Shamala Kamala could probably do it, and she didn't. So what did you think?
When people asked me that before the election, I would say my gut was telling me Kamala, but I really think that was hopeful wishing. I had a lot of anxiety going into the election, and this might be a little woo-woo, but in 2020, I had a really bad feeling. I felt like Biden was going to win, but I felt like there was going to be some kind of violent attempt from Trump supporters. And I was right with January 6th.
Let's just call it a coup. Let's just call it a coup.
Yeah,
attempt.
It was a coup. It was an insurrection. Yes. So I felt like something like that was going to happen. Someone asked me a couple times, because I was doing a lot of podcasts for my book, they're like, do you think we're going to see another like insurrection type? And like, okay, when I say spiritual experience, I've always felt like I had the gift of discernment. I don't know, like whatever, but I just like, I like feel things. And a lot of times like, it's just, it comes true. But this time I was like, I don't feel like there's going to be any violence, but I was still saying I wanted Kamala to win, but I really I was like, I don't think there's going to be violence this time. And now I'm like, oh, well, that's just because Trump won, because they are all happy now. And like, notice too how suddenly there's zero talk about voter fraud.
Yeah, or very
suddenly
little.
It was a fair election.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Hey, I just want to quickly just point something out. You talk about having the gift of discernment. We had a guest, I can't remember who it was, Brian. We had someone on and we were talking about like, if you don't have the gift of discernment, then maybe that's just like your escape clause. It's like, oh, it's not my fault. God didn't give me the gift of discernment, so I just make bad choices. So I think the gift of discernment is something, worth having.
That's good
Could
to
be
know.
a curse too. So, this election win has been largely led by rallying within churches, within evangelical churches. Do you think that politics is something that belongs in church? I think the horse is bolted. I don't think you can separate it, particularly in America. I mean, there's certainly been a bit of an influence here in Australia, but nothing like we've seen in America. Do you think that it is something that churches should be involved with? And if so, how do they actually curb that power?
Right. So I am a big believer in the separation of church and state because of how political power wrapped up in religion can just be detrimental, especially to marginalized communities, historically speaking. But in America, even though we do have the separation of church and state, supposedly, that's not happening. That's not happening in conservative churches and evangelical churches. So here's the thing. Like I hear people from the more conservative evangelical side that, they think Christian nationalism is this made up term just to demonize them. And then they turn around and they say, well, look, Kamala Harris spoke at a church. That's Christian nationalism. Or, if you have they really focus on the Black church. Like if you have a Black church that's talking about racial justice, they're saying that's Christian nationalism. And I don't think that's true. Like how I would define Christian nationalism is when you are promoting one very narrow fundamentalist ideology to the detriment of others. So I can see, I think as Christians, for a church, I think it's okay to get involved politically when you are advocating for the oppressed, when you are on the side of the marginalized, which is what Jesus did. If you are on the side of power and you're on the side of throwing children in cages at the border or taking away trans people's health care or demonizing women who get reproductive rights, calling them murderers, throwing them in jail or throwing their doctors in jail, that's Christian nationalism. That is when you are using scripture to oppress, or you can use scripture to liberate. So it's a fine line though, because then it makes it easy for the other side to be like, well, you're doing a Christian nationalism too. But
But April, can I just point out that there's a big difference between Kamala Harris going to a church and taking her politics to Christians. But I think Christian nationalism is the exact reverse. It's the church taking its morality to politics. It's an attempt to push, the morality upon non-believers. And I think that's what, Christian nationalism, another term is dominionism, right? I mean, that's what it's about. It's about taking the power. It's about standing in the power. Not people of power going to Christians. And I think that's a big difference between what the Democrats are doing, reaching out to Christians, and what the Republicans are doing, which is, co-opting them. And I also think that there's no place for a Democrat to actually be able to say, I mean, it's political suicide to say, I don't believe in God or I don't believe in Jesus. And no doubt some of them don't. And also some of the Republicans. There would be Republicans that don't believe in God, but you dare not say that in America or your political career is over. You just won't get voted into anything.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Barack Obama was a Christian, but because he had a Muslim middle name and the whole lie went on that he was Muslim. And that was one reason Christians could not vote for him. I can't tell you how many people told me that Barack Obama was a Muslim and we could not vote for him because he was not a Christian, even though he said that he was a Christian and could quote scriptures and went to church and all the things. But yeah, no, there's the Christian nationalism is not just about religious power. The ultimate goal is a theocracy. It's to take the country back for God. It's to rule as a Christian authoritarian. It's with the Seven Mountain Mandate, they believe that before Jesus can come back and we see the biblical end times come into play, that Christians, and it's their narrow idea of what a Christian is, because there's 45,000 Christian denominations worldwide. And so theirs would be a very specific Christian belief. It's putting those Christians in power and all of the different major influences in the world, which is, it's like the government, it's the military, it's media, it's entertainment, it's family, it's education. I think I'm missing one. I don't remember what it is. But anyway, basically that Christians have to control all of that. And so they are seeking power and they want everyone to kind of be under this Christian utopia, because in their mind, it would be heaven on earth, but really they would be oppressing a lot of people.
There was a time when Christianity ruled the earth, and it was called the Dark Ages.
Right. And a good thing to remember too was how the German evangelical church overwhelmingly supported Hitler. Like we hear about the Dietrich Bonhoeffers and I was taught, oh no, look, Christians stood up to Hitler. See, like we're the good guys. We've always been the good guys because look what Bonhoeffer did. But I was never taught, but Bonhoeffer was ousted. Like the church did not like him at the time, and the overwhelming church supported Hitler. So that has been very eerie to just see, to compare the two, which I'm not saying Trump is Hitler. I don't think Trump is a true believer in anything. But it is scary how close we could be to having a theocracy in America.
I think it's actually it's a scary place, and I can't imagine actually living there, and particularly someone who, I thought before we were chatting to you, I thought of Beecher, and I thought, what is Beecher's place in a Trump world? Is someone that doesn't identify as either gender, and someone that obviously has a different view on the world. How's life going to be, do you think, for the trans community, for the gender diverse community, for the gay community? What's going to happen under a Trump administration?
For your family too, because you're in the midst of this. Your children are in the midst of this. What's it going to look like? Yeah.
I mean, we don't know. We are kind of preparing for the worst, hoping for the best. Like I just renewed our passports. And you hope you never have to use that. But I don't know. I try not to be fear mongering and think about the worst case scenario, because I do believe that reality is usually not what our worst fear is. But there are a lot of people that are on a mission right now to eradicate trans people. Like there is a right-wing commentator who has millions of followers who literally have said he wants to eradicate transgenderism. And the trans people in this country are terrified because there's already bills in place of them wanting to take away gender-affirming care. Usually it's for minors, but there are places where they're taking it away for adults too. Like they just want to get rid of it because of their Christian belief. They believe it's an abomination. God only made male and female, despite the fact that trans people have always existed in the history of the world. So I don't know what it's going to be like. I will say we feel emboldened because like this is the time to be loud and to fight for what we believe is right. And I do think most people who fall into Christian nationalism, I don't think they realize they're Christian nationalists. I think they think they're just being good Christian people, good old boys. And I think the more that they can see how normal queer people are, like by seeing Beecher and our family, and we're just like them, like we're just like any other American family, I think they'd be less likely to hate us. And I know a lot of people that feel emboldened that are going to be fighting too. So I don't know what it's going to be like. It does seem like Trump's main focus is going to be immigration and the economy with the tariffs. So like we're like fingers crossed that trans people are not the first to be attacked. But it is really scary. I will say, I don't think they've really thought it through, because like there's a city in Texas right now that has a law they're about to enact a law where you can only go into a bathroom that matches what your birth certificate says. And it's a small town in Texas. So I don't know. I doubt there's many trans people that are even there. But like there's 0% chance that women are going to want trans men in their bathrooms, because there are a lot of trans men that look like dudes. Like they've got full beards and they're trans men. Like you would never know that they are trans. And it's like, it's kind of like idiocracy. Like these are rules that we don't need, like laws for the sake of laws that are they're going to find problems with these laws. And there's ways to show how stupid some of these laws would be if it comes to that.
Well, I mean, the American system has a lot of checks and balances to make sure that, a dictator doesn't arise. And, that's one of the things that I think as well. I mean, there's definitely influences and things they could do. For example, what Trump did with, stacking the Supreme Court, which, led to an overturning of Roe versus Wade. There's no doubt that that's real, that's causing real trauma to real people. And so I'm not, with what I'm about to say, I'm not saying that there isn't going to be damage done. But he was there for 4 years. Yeah, bad stuff happened, but it wasn't the end of days, if you know what I mean. And I mean, my hope for you guys is it's 4 years. It's going to be bad. It's going to be dark, but I know you'll get through it. You're still the world's largest economy. You've still got so much, you've still got the NFL. There's just so much that you guys are actually able to do. And I don't know, I don't buy into the fear mongering either. And I think this, the way I looked at it is this is his last 4 years. This is all he can do. And then it's over until Vance gets in, I guess.
The problem is he's surrounding himself with yes people now. In his first 4 years, he had some checks and balances that kept him from doing things. He even tried to fire people that told him no, but he couldn't fire them because they were a protected class of a federal government. They were nonpartisan. And, he said very early on in his term, he wants to reclassify those positions so that he can just fire anyone who tells him no. And I mean, the cabinet people he's picking, I agree with you. I hope we get through it. There's all like he just has been flirting with the idea of being a dictator, and which granted he says a lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff he says he doesn't do. So that is the hope. But there's also, with them having control of the Supreme Court, the House, and the Senate, he could do a lot of damage. It's weird because I go back and forth between like, oh my gosh, like if the worst happens, this could be the end of democracy. But I do hope that there's enough Republicans in the Senate and the House that are not full MAGA people that will not vote certain things through. And I do think overall, if you take everyone that voted for either Kamala or third party, and then we had like 13, 15 million people that just didn't vote, that voted in 2020. There's more of than there are of MAGA.
Look, I tend to agree, April, with your assessment around what he can do. And I don't think this is fear mongering. This is reality. He has the House, the Senate, he got the popular vote, like he got the full trinity, and he has a stacked Supreme Court. He's got 2 years to really run amok, is the way I see it, because I think you'll have maybe a change in the Senate potentially, which balances power a little bit more. The bit where I do look at it that I think there can be a positive spin is I think he is going to wreak havoc. I think he is actually going to. I mean, the appointment of RFK Jr. Is frightening, because this guy, people go, oh yeah, he just came out against the COVID vax. No, he didn't. 20 years he's been anti-vaccination. This guy is going to tear apart your health system if you've got, and you've already got a shit health system. Let's be honest. It's a user pays, and so I think he is going to do a lot of damage. I think the silver lining in all of this is people are going to go, fuck, this is not what we signed up for. We didn't anticipate that they were going to do this damage to society, to people. I think there will be a lot of damage along the way, but I think there will be quite a few aha moments for people where they'll go, I didn't sign up for this and things have got to change. That might take 8 years to turn around. You might see a Trump, you might see a Vance that follows up. I don't know. I don't know if Democrats have lost too much of the vote to turn it around in 4 years. Possibly possibly they could do it, but I think it's going to be a very, very hard 4 years to do that.
What you're saying there, Brian, is, that sort of political truism that people don't vote in a new government, they vote out an old government. So it is entirely possible. But also remembering that the Republicans are going to have to put forward a new candidate anyway, because Trump can only do this term and then he's out. So in that sense, there's a possibility that it could continue because it'll be another face, someone not aligned with Trump. But look, I'm just trying to be half full glass here and just not fall down into a sort of a hole of depression and despair, if you know what I mean. And I know it's going to be really hard on a lot of people. I didn't mean to be dismissive, but go on. You want to say something, April?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I appreciate that. And I definitely am trying to be half full as well. And I do think that there is a chance that the chaos and the infighting, and you're dealing with a lot of narcissistic alpha males, that they self-destruct. So I think I am rooting for self-sabotage, which I think actually there's a decent chance. I mean, they're still going to cause a lot of damage. But yeah, there is still hope.
I think you're going to see a bit of an interesting space with you. You've got J.D. Vance, love him or hate him. I don't have any time for him, but he's a smart guy. He's articulate, and Trump is going to be incredibly threatened by this guy. Trump's ego will not be able to handle that sort of vice president. I think there's going to be a lot of carnage in the party over the next 4 years as well.
Yeah, I thought that too. When Trump got up, I don't know if it was his, sort of victory, whatever it's called, speech, and then he gave it over to Vance to talk, and I just thought, ooh, wow, I wasn't expecting that. And then Vance played it really smart though, and just talked about Trump. That's basically what he did, and I thought, yeah, okay, you know exactly what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
for sure. So,
it'll
April, I got another question.
Go
I got another question for you, April. On a microcosm level, you went from being raised like this to buying into it to moving out of it. Do you think there's any parallels that you could apply to the nation? Like, what does the messaging need to be? What is the trajectory, the journey going to be like if America is going to come to the other side of this? Because let's face it, nations go through this kind of stuff, and America's not alone. There's a lot of right-wing populism that's happening around the world. But what parallels can you draw between your journey and what you think might happen for the US?
Well, I mean, I like to say if I can change, that anybody can. And I do think that most Americans, really most people, I would say most people in the world, want to be good people. And like, I think that's just like a natural instinct that no one wants to be a bad person. I mean, maybe there's some, but I think most people want to be good. And I think if we can appeal to people's goodness, that people will change. The big problem now is going to be getting through the right-wing propaganda machine, because they are controlling, like, the comparison between right-wing media and left-wing media. Right-wing is blowing progressives out of the water as far as the reach that they have. So piercing through that is going to be the challenge, but it happened to me. I was able to do it. I think when people meet other people that are not like them, or if someone in their family comes out gay or trans, or if you have a friend that is an immigrant who has friends that are undocumented, that, like, I think people are going to come in contact with a lot of the harm that this administration is going to cause, whether directly or from someone that they know, and people will start asking questions then when it affects them. And I think a Donald Trump presidency is not going to really be good for anybody unless you're a rich white dude.
And if they are going to start rounding people up to deport them, and people start hiding their friends, then the parallels with Nazi Germany, that's not hyperbole. That's actually what people will start to do. People will put themselves at risk to, Diary of Anne Frank kind of stuff. It could be a reality. But I wonder if it's going to happen. It's like the wall. He didn't build the wall. at least the way that he said he was going to build the wall.
I mean, yeah, we'll see. He seems very dead set on that. But logistically, though, to deport every single undocumented immigrant, that's going to be a very, very, very difficult task, maybe even an impossible task. So, yeah, I don't know. But as far as parallels, I do think that I think people are going to start waking up like I did, and hopefully it's more quicker. It happens more often and quicker than it did for me.
I think also, and you see this often, like in Australia, there's generally speaking, there's only been one or two times throughout us as a federation where you've seen a government be in for a certain amount of time. So you do get protest votes and you get people going, we've had enough of that government, we're going to flip them out. But in some ways, and this is a personal view of mine, and take it or leave it, but I think that the Democrats weren't able to articulate a solid value proposition for what they stood for, what they would bring to a society, whereas Trump, love or hate his message, he was able to articulate, we hate immigrants, we're going to make America great again, and got people on board. And in many ways, I hope the Democrats learn from this, because I think you can't be all things to all people. And I think the Democrats potentially tried to be all things to all people. And when you put out that catch-all, you catch no one. So you saw a very, very sharp dive in their vote. You saw a lot of people not turning out. You saw blacks and Hispanics turning to Trump more than Democrats, all of those sort of things. So what's gone wrong? Why haven't they actually created something that people wanted to get on board with? Whereas a really shit message that he's brought, people have gone, well, yeah, it's a shit message, but it's a message, and we're going to jump on board with it. Notwithstanding all the religious fundamentalism which pushed that as well. So I think there's a lot of learnings in it. But for you, though, let's come back to your book. I mean, you write about this stuff. You write about how you were completely enveloped in it. If you were to speak to a Christian nationalist, what would some of the questions be that you would say to them to try and maybe just challenge their worldview and to get them to think about the position that they've not only got themselves into, but as a result, your country into?
Yeah, I think definitely asking questions that people asked me when I was in it that I may have had an answer, which was just, I had my talking points, but it stuck with me. A lot of people have that, that don't know me, and Beecher especially, they have these preconceived notions of what a trans person is. And so, I would just say, do you think my spouse is evil? Do you think my spouse has demons? Do you think I have why, just ask them okay, I understand that you don't agree that trans people exist, that they should stay whatever their birth certificate says, and that they should dress like the societal gender norms that, our society places onto them. And then I say, if you think it's a mental disorder, what do you suggest that they do? If not transition, what would you say, if you woke up one day tomorrow, say I was talking to y'all, I was like, if you woke up tomorrow and you were in a woman's body, but you still had the same brain, what would you want it? What would you say to do? If you could go back to your other body, would you? What would you do? Because a lot of people, they don't really have an answer. They point out problems, but they don't have solutions to what the actual issue is. Same thing with abortion. Okay, if you have a wife, or if you are a woman and you want this baby, you finally get pregnant, you're so excited. The doctor looks at you and says, you have an ectopic pregnancy, but I cannot do a D&C on you because of what the laws say. This baby will not survive. What would you do? Would you go across the state to save your life or to save your wife? Or would you say, oh no, that's the rule. We just accept that and your wife dies. Just putting these real world things that have that are happening, and just like ask them, okay, like I understand where your position is. How would you solve this problem then? This problem is real. It exists. This is an actual issue that everyday people in America deal with. What's your solution? And that doesn't involve people dying, or, and especially if it's a Christian nationalist too, bringing the words of Jesus into it. Like Jesus says to welcome the foreigner. How do you justify kicking out immigrants, undocumented or not? Like, how do you justify that as a Christ follower if that's really what you're saying? Because there's a lot of cognitive dissonance in that world, especially if you're trying to follow what Jesus said, like lay down your weapons and turn the other cheek and love your enemy. And it falls apart really fast. But I found, like, if you can just ask people questions and get them to try to solve the problem, they don't have an answer. They might say their talking points, they might double down in the moment, but it'll stick with them.
Do you have any examples of where you have done that and then you have people coming back and certainly asking a bit of a follow-up and maybe even seeking advice? And obviously these things take time, but I guess I'm digging into this a bit more because I know most of our listeners are in the States, and a lot of them, I'm sure, will be facing the same things that you're facing. And this is something that I think that you have a lot of great advice and, dare I say, wisdom in the space. So I guess it's just sharing those examples and those successes to give people that bit more hope, I guess, in going forward.
I would say one thing that had happened to me, I was talking about how America was a Christian nation, and that America should stay a Christian nation because that's how we were founded. And I didn't know this at the time, and I probably just acted like they were lying, but someone had told me, because I used, the Pledge of Allegiance says one nation under God. Why would it say that if we weren't a Christian nation? And someone informed me that, they didn't add under God until the 1950s, when Billy Graham and Dwight Eisenhower came together to fight godless communism. They tried to make it seem like we were more Christian because they thought communists were godless. And if we were more Christian, then we could fight the communists a little bit better. And that was shocking to me because I just thought, George Washington from the beginning was like, one nation under God, done. Like, that is who we are. Especially like Christian persecution, there's this narrative in this world that Christians are persecuted, and that American Christians are like the most hated group in America. It's funny saying it out loud now, but I like truly believed that. And so I like to say to people with that, I was like, okay, if Christians are persecuted in this country, why has every single president claimed some form of Christianity? And if you feel like Christians are so persecuted, what rights have you lost as a Christian in this country? Give me an example of what rights you feel like you have lost. And they usually cannot say anything about it.
We addressed that with the End Times episode that we did recently. And a lot of the reason for that is because they see the Bible as written to them now, rather than at a point in time. And the New Testament does speak a lot about the persecution of Christians, or the about to come persecution of Christians. And because they read it as if it was written not 2,000 years ago, but at most 30 years ago, they read that and go, this is coming, this is happening. And I think a lot of that feeds into that. And that's where that sort of persecution complex comes. But it's hilarious because it's not the case. You're actually standing in the seat of power. It's not the other way around. Hey, April, I want to ask you one last question, if that's okay. And that is, last time we talked, you were facing a lot of backlash online and criticism from former friends and family because you had left Christian nationalism. And I saw recently that you were copping some flack. I don't know if that's something you say in America, but you were copping some criticism because of the release of your book and saying that you were voting for Kamala. Now that you've written the book, has the the persecution, and that's what it is, right? Has that intensified for you as you've gone more public? But also, having nailed your colours to this mast, is it easier to deal with, or does it never get easy to deal with?
I mean, it's definitely gotten easier in the sense that a lot of the people the last time we talked who were coming at me then, they couldn't stay in community with me anymore. Like they left or blocked me or whatever. Like people that I know in real life, family members and like extended family members and all that. So they those people were not around this time. I went really viral on Twitter the weekend before the election because I said I was a Christian wife and mom voting for Kamala. And I also said I was tired of seeing my faith weaponized as a tool of oppression and hatred, and that Christian nationalism is a perversion of both the faith and the Constitution. And so they got really mad. And a bunch of right-wing, larger right-wing accounts started quote tweeting it, and they found like old pictures of my family. I had one picture of my family that was still public, and it was like my cover photo of my private Facebook page. And that was the picture that this dude had found. Thankfully, he blurred out my kids' faces, but there they were. And they used that they brought Beecher and said that I couldn't be a Christian and that I was lying because I was married to who they called a radical trans activist, which if you know Beecher, they are many things, but they are not a radical activist.
Yeah, and if anyone's a radical activist, you.
Yeah, right. I guess you could call me that for sure. But anyway, so we were getting death threats. Someone had wished that my children be murdered. That got really, really hard, and I had to, I definitely cried because I was like, "Am I putting my family in danger by speaking out against this?" And Beecher was consoling me because I was like, I feel so strongly that I'm saying truth and that I'm speaking truth to power and that I'm standing on the right side. I'm on the right side of history. I have no doubts about that. I was like, but am I putting my my kids didn't ask for this? And Beecher was looking at, looked at me and he's like, April, you're never doing the wrong thing if you're doing the right thing. I was like, okay. So I tried to do some things. I called my local government. I was like, can you take my name off the public records, please? And they were kind of unhelpful, but that's fine. But yeah, I mean, it's hard, but it's also I'm trying to think how to say this. I've always wondered, if I lived through the 1930s when Hitler came to power, if I was in Germany, would I have been on the right side of history then? And at least I know now that yes, I would have. And I feel like I can hold my head high knowing that I am standing against authoritarianism and against oppression and against hate. And yes, I get a lot of flack and it can be scary at times. And I'm very terrified of what the next 4 years are going to hold. But I'm more emboldened than ever to stand up for what's right and to do the right thing. And, whatever comes. And I can at least hold my head high and tell my children one day when they're old enough to understand this, that I stood against Donald Trump.
And there is a certain intensity to all that I admire. I think the fact you even mentioned your kids, because I've asked myself that question too, would I hide Jews if, I'd been, and it would mean putting my own children at risk? Yes. So, it's a big thing that you're doing. So well done. I hope that doesn't sound patronizing. I'm genuinely saying it's amazing.
No, and I'm sorry that happened. That is absolutely horrendous. And I can't imagine what it is that you had to go through to, I just think of my own kids, and I just think if someone had made those sort of threats, I would want to go after them. So I can completely empathise. Come to Australia, April. You've renewed your passports. We have a great country that usually is very good at separation of powers, except we did have a Pentecostal Prime Minister for 4 years not long ago. Yes, and it was horrible.
I think he was the first ever Pentecostal in power in a major nation.
Yeah, possibly. There's a couple in South America that certainly... And
yeah, but they
sure
don't count. Come on, they're not
yeah,
white.
I think they're a major nation. But I think, look, our current Prime Minister, he refused to swear on the Bible for his affirmation. He made a civil declaration because he's an atheist. So we generally just don't see the stuff that you see, and really I hope we never do. But look, we do stand with you and all of our other listeners who are in the States over the next 4 years to hopefully turn the Democrats around and get some real opposition. And hopefully it'll really rise to the surface and you'll see their true character, and people will be absolutely disgusted by what happens, because I do think you've got a few tricky times coming along, but may you all be safe, and may Mother Earth protect you all.
And let's face it, your book is more relevant than ever. Star-Spangled Jesus, Leaving Christian Nationalism and Finding a True Faith. And I'm guessing that's available everywhere, everywhere where people find books, except, I don't know, has it been banned yet, April?
It hasn't. I hope it gets banned. I hope Moms for Liberty boycotts my book at some point if it gets big enough to matter. But yes, no, it is available wherever books are sold.
A banned book becomes more desirable, so that's exactly what you want. It happened here under conservative rule in a couple of states in the 1980s. We had a couple of books and movies banned, and I remember as a teenager going, I've got to have that book. I've got to watch that movie. So may it be banned.
Ban it, yeah.
Alrighty, thanks, April. Thanks again for the chat.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
See you next time. If you'd like to connect with the I Was a Teenage Fundamentalist podcast, then please see the links in our link tree in the show notes. We invite you to join our listener community on Facebook, and we're also on Instagram, X, and Reddit. Check out our merch on Redbubble. We've got t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, and all kinds of great Evangelical stuff that you can wear proudly. All proceeds go to building and promoting the podcast. We want to give a huge shout out to our Patreon supporters. Subscribers get a range of benefits, including free merch, early access to episodes, access to our exclusive subscribers group, and monthly bonus content. Again, all proceeds of this go to the running and promotion cost of the podcast. A special thanks to Ava, who manages our social strategy, and also to Kerry and Bree, who manage our Facebook listener group, and also to Bree, who puts out our monthly newsletter on Substack. All of our episodes are transcribed by Leanne to increase accessibility. The show is produced and hosted by Brian McDowell and Troy Waller. The sound engineering for this episode was done by Clifford. I Was a Teenage Fundamentalist is available wherever you find your podcasts. Again, you can find all our links in our link tree in the show notes. Or why don't you pop across to our website at www.iwasateenagefundamentalist.com